Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Political Insider. I'm Brett Smith, your humble host, and joining me today is a very special guest and a good friend. He's an award-winning actor, screenwriter, producer, vocalist, and director. Robert Davi, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Brett. It's good
That's
to see you again, brother.
You too. It's an honor, man. Hey, you've got a new film out. And for
Yes.
those who might have missed the news, if they're living in a cave, it's called My Son Hunter. Tell our audience what it's about.
Well, you know, it's funny that we've been out since September 7th, tons of press, and a lot of people still don't know, well, where do I get the film? How do I, so I want to start off with that if you don't mind.
Yeah, you bet.
You can go to mysonhunter.com. Very simple. You can watch the trailer there. You can download it, own it. And now we have DVDs.
Awesome.
You can buy,
Yes.
we just started the DVD thing, so you can buy your own DVD for it. And so get the film, and it's gotten, well, I'll let you talk about it. You've seen it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the film it's My Son Hunter. We shot it in Serbia, in Belgrade.
Okay.
That was another movie I did in Bulgaria. This was in Belgrade. And it's told through the eyes of a 25-year-old left-wing activist who works as a exotic dancer part-time to pay for her college education. And she meets up with Hunter Biden, of course, at a club. And then the story unfolds with the relationship, and she finds out at a certain point that she doesn't know who he is, except that he's a VIP, and she finds out that this is Hunter Biden. And then a character played by Franklin Oyodele, who is a Nigerian footballer. I loved his face and his look. He plays a bouncer that's put in there by the club to protect the girl, of course, and protect the people. And he's the one that navigates her through the media that has been ignoring the stories. And he was able to pull it up. And she says, "What are you, a white supremacist?" He goes, "Yeah, kitty, I'm the black face of white supremacy."
It's a great line.
Lawrence Fox plays the Hunter Biden, brilliantly played by Lawrence Fox, great English actor. And John James plays Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And Gina Carano plays a Secret Service agent who is almost like the Deus Ex Machina. She's the narrator through the piece that comes in and out and gives you a little bit of insider information. And we deal with we don't demonize the drug addiction, but we expose the corruption with the Biden family, and that this son, the smartest guy I know, that Joe says, is hitting a crack pipe every 15 minutes while he's dealing with the communist spy chief and making deals in China and the Ukraine, and flying on the plane with his father to China, but never talks about business, of course. And it's an indictment too, Brett, on the media, on the mainstream media, on social media, on the established media, that they ignored this story until recently, when the New York Times came out and said, "Oh, it's true." And then Mark Zuckerberg came out, and he then says, Zuckerberg basically says, "Yeah, we were told by the FBI to bury this story for several weeks, and you know what's been going on." So it's also an indictment on the media for basically withholding information to the American people that should have been told. This is like two middle fingers to the establishment and the mainstream media, and hopefully people watch the film and see what's going on in their country.
Well, we got word this week that the feds have been sitting on information on Hunter for a long time. Do you think he's going to get indicted?
My feeling on that is I don't know. But the indictment or the charges that they're talking about are a gun permit and also a tax thing. Now, face value, all right, those are serious issues, but there's no mention of the influence peddling with the communist Chinese spy chief, with energy companies in China and the Ukraine. What deals were made? What could have been compromised?
Well, yeah, and he was over there without Secret Service. That's the other thing that people don't talk about. He requested the Secret Service not travel with him when he's hanging out with the head spy chief of China.
Yeah,
It's
and who they
crazy,
can't
man.
find now. Some of these people are missing, and there's a
Really,
very, oh yeah,
really.
and there's a very poignant scene where Devon Archer, who was his business partner, and also so was John Kerry's son, actually, but John Kerry's son uh, left the thing before they got a little bit dodgy
Mm.
earlier on, and there's a scene with Devon Archer based on the texts between Hunter and Devon, where he basically says, Devon talks about, and I'll sum this up. He says, "You're leaving me, you're hanging me to dry. Your dad's administration is coming after me. Why are they trying to do this to me? I thought that this was, a family. I thought that, now my family is in jeopardy, my children. What
Mm.
about my children?" And he goes, and these Asians are getting in my head. What do I tell them? So that's basically saying to him, wait a second, this is getting serious. How do I handle this? And then Hunter comes back with, you're part of a great family, and every great family has this issue, and blah blah blah. And people are after them, and but just stay the course, and with enough persistence and love. So he's basically telling him, we got your back, but it's very insidious.
It's like the mob. I mean, that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of organized crime. So I've seen it twice, the movie, and I really enjoyed it. One of the things I wanted to tell you was that, visually, I found it beautifully shot. And we talked about this on Political Punks podcast, how you like to light everything and not rely on post production. And I saw that very much throughout the film. I just thought it was really well done. And I'm always really critical of artistic endeavors, movie, TV, animation, comics, whatever that the center right does, when it's not equal to or greater than what the left would do. And I think there's a level of authenticity that sometimes is lacking, but not in your work, obviously, and not in this. It's beautifully shot. It's really well done. You have star power, like you're talking about. You've got Lawrence Fox, comes from um,
Well,
a
English royalty.
dynasty. Yeah, right,
Yeah, he's
exactly.
got James Fox, who's his uncle, who did the Day of the Jackal. Well,
Yeah,
excuse me, that's his father, James Fox, who did all those movies with David Lean,
right.
and performance with Mick Jagger, and Ed
Performance, right.
Fox, who did Day of the Jackal, and his family. His whole family is a very respected artistic family, and also Lawrence is head of the Reclaim Party in England,
Hmm. Right.
who's uh, but. And he does a terrific job playing
Yeah,
Hunter, and all the, because it's like juggling six balls in the air at the same time,
yeah.
with all the condition, the physical condition that Hunter would be in, being high and also being articulate at the same time, making these deals.
Yeah, he's a functioning drug addict.
Yeah,
I mean, essentially, which is it just adds another level of kind of danger and just absolute insanity to what he's doing.
yeah. And
Um,
again, I say the media absolutely ignoring the story. I mean, even I had a conversation with Rudy Giuliani where he told me when the FBI came to uh, explore his office and get information, which he said they found nothing. There were two laptops on the table, and he says, "Well, what about these laptops here?" And they said, "What are they?" He goes, "Well, those are Hunter Biden's laptops." He goes, "Oh, we don't want those." So I mean, that just shows you the. It's curious. It's very curious because if it was anyone else's family, let's bring up Trump.
yeah.
If it was Trump's family, what would they be doing? What would the media be doing? And even if you look at Leslie Stahl, take a look at Leslie Stahl's interview
Hmm.
with uh, Donald Trump
Yeah.
from several years ago. When she asks Donald Trump, Donald Trump brings up the laptop, and she
Hmm.
goes, no, no, that wouldn't have happened. That
Yeah.
no, 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 that's not so. He
She's
goes, what
like,
do you mean?
no, no,
Yeah,
like telling some little kid
like
that he's
yeah,
ridiculous, that this is fantasy, Donald.
yeah.
No, what are you talking? No, it was pathetic.
It's
It was
pathetic,
truly
and that's what
pathetic.
they do. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing to our country as an overall. It's like Joe Biden saying, "Yes, inflation is under control, and my programs are doing this." I mean, flat out, bold-faced, uh,
Yeah.
misrepresentation, if you want to call it in a kindly way. And then anything that the Trump had done, it's like the end of the world. It's the
Yeah.
end of our democracy and our republic.
Well,
After they've had Russian collusion and the insurrection inside our own government, with Hillary Clinton starting with the campaign.
yeah. Yeah, the whole thing with Tony Bobolinsky as well, the media's lack of curiosity, I guess is a good way to describe it. Lack of curiosity, lack of interest in this guy outside of Fox News and a couple other outlets. But this guy talking about, the plausible deniability that the Bidens claimed that they had. It's incredible to me. I'm old enough to have seen several political scandals and impeachment of Clinton, and there's just such a lack of curiosity on behalf of the media in light of all of this incredibly damning information, the laptop, on and on and on, the emails, the texts. It's insane. It's insane. And they've just further damaged their credibility to the point where, it just bifurcates the audience into two camps.
Not only that, you have to say to yourself, then, where is our country? Where is our country when you have it's split down the middle, supposedly? But if you're any thinking kind of person, whether you like the style of Donald Trump or not, whether you have this or that or the other thing, what's good for this nation? Let's say the nation is our child, and we're all parents to this nation. We're all keepers of this nation's, they'll bring up the January 6th incident as the alpha and omega of anything political. Meanwhile, what's going on behind the scenes is more insidious than what was in your face of a public that's been, and I'm not condoning anything that happened at the Capitol, absolutely. But when you have a populace that's watching, half the country, that's watching their cities being burned and looted, and the lies and deception and the Russian collusion and Russia, Putin, over and over again, 3 impeachments and the Steele dossier. You not think any thinking person? How dumb are the American people?
Robert, what did you think of this $1 million offered to corroborate the Steele dossier from the FBI? That's taxpayer money.
Again, it's the most corrupt aspect of in our nation. $1 million. This is like
a federal institution like the FBI. I mean, and silence on behalf of the mainstream media. I don't see that really being reported much, really anywhere.
People don't know about it. If you went out, Brett, and started asking the kids and the American people, they wouldn't know.
Yeah,
they wouldn't know what that was. They didn't understand what that was, and yet they'll understand. The January 6th hearing. That was right in your face. And, how about Pelosi and Schumer? How about somebody putting them in a room and questioning them deeply about this FBI thing and the Steele dossier and everything else that went on?
Yeah.
And what about, letting the country being burned to the ground and looted to the ground, and the criminal aspect that's going on in our nation over, and the open borders, the borders that are absolutely, choked.
People are used to the media, being checked out on this stuff, and I think that a lot of people are checked out on everything, right or left. They're probably not paying attention to the January, like normal people, regular people that are kind of middle America, apolitical. They kind of tune in and out. I don't think they're watching January 6th, and they're certainly not watching anything on Hunter Biden because it's not being reported. So here comes your movie, which is a great way, probably the best way to get across information at this point, entertainment.
Yeah, it's so important that they watch the film. I mean, it's a good film. It's entertaining, great performances, and you're going to see a peek into the behind the scenes of this, aspect to our government that's been going on with all politicians on both sides.
Right.
It's no mistake to me. The issue becomes, again, the media is quiet about exposing this and letting it go down.
Yeah, I think about Peter Schweizer's work with like Red-Handed,
Divine,
Profiles in Corruption. He goes after everybody. He just doesn't go after Democrats, and I think it would behoove the American public to learn about all politicians.
Absolutely.
Not right and left and center. It's not. it's the swamp. It's not Republicans or Democrats. It's the swamp. It's the
Yeah.
bureaucracy and these bureaucrats who think they rule over everybody, and then the media who's in collusion. So that's why I always encourage conservatives. There's a huge swath of people out there that you can interact with, but you're not going to get very far with political ads and political speeches and white papers. Um, but you can get there with them. You can get their attention, and you can bring them to conclusions on their own through entertainment and storytelling. And
Yeah.
Andrew Breitbart talked about this. I don't think that people really understood what he said maybe at the time when he said politics is downstream from culture, but I think they get it now when they look at education, entertainment, the media, these institutions that have been infected with essentially cultural Marxists and communists, these water carriers.
Yeah.
It's
Well, they've been in
crazy.
there for decades, don't
They
forget.
have. Yeah.
And, you can do a lot of damage by putting people in certain positions. Look what happened recently. And look at how the left does what happened in California recently with these Democrats that were behind the scenes talking about racial things, and yet the mainstream media wants to ignore it and pretend it's white supremacists when
They're
it's not.
running cover for them for sure.
They're running cover for it. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's so blatantly dangerous, and yet you've got all the media companies and again big tech and everything else silencing people when it's again both sides. So
Mhm.
we have to find that middle. We have to
Yes.
find that middle ground that people want America, yeah,
Yeah.
to not be a distorted kind of giant corrupt country.
Yeah, I agree. I think culturally, sometimes I think to myself, do I want a hard right culture? And sometimes I think that maybe that's just as bad as a hard left one. And maybe it's just better to go back to kind of like when in the 80s and the 90s, where we were sort of more, we were a center culture, but we were definitely center right. I think we've always been a center right culture because we're born out of revolution, which is unique unto us. But
Yes.
I would much rather, drag the culture from this crazy left wing space that it's occupying, drag it more towards the center where people can at least have a conversation. Now it's just name calling and blacklisting and canceling. If we can get back to the center, I think it's a much more healthy place to be. Center right, preferably.
Yeah. Well, you're having again, when the media is so indoctrinated
Yeah.
and indoctrinating, it's very difficult. How do you get, except for a guy like Bill Maher,
Yeah.
who's now is pulling the way left, you know what I mean, to a certain position in a
Yeah.
certain way or exposing it. And you've got Dave Chappelle, these comedians that are at least giving some kind of um,
Mhm.
balance. But yet you've got these late night talk. That's why Greg Gutfeld is the number 1 talk show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He beat out Stephen Colbert and Kimmel and
Yeah.
Fallon and all
Yeah.
these guys. So how do you then let people hear you? How do we not just speak into an echo chamber? And culture
Exactly.
does that. Culture can broaden the echo chamber, but the danger is when the left wing is controlling the message. Films like My Son Hunter,
Mhm.
so they stay in a lane where they should be really broadened out,
Right.
much larger. Uh, and how do you then get that to the people that they realize that they must realize it's important that they get aware,
Mhm.
that they see
Yeah.
something that gives them an alternative perspective on what's happening in their own country, because you're going to
Yeah.
wake up one morning and like this Generation X or Z, whatever they call it
Yeah.
now, Generation Z.
The young kids in their 20s basically at this
I
point.
mean, look at they just. I live in Florida now, and they put Ben Sasse in as the president of the University of Florida. Did you see what was happening there?
I saw it. Yeah.
I mean, these
Nobody
kids,
likes him. Nobody likes him, right or left at this point.
they
But
want that guy out.
yeah,
It's
it's
insane. And then also, like I did a film called Roe versus Wade, where I played the Justice Brennan, who came up with the idea of a woman's right to privacy,
Mhm.
based on a Texas case 2 years earlier than Roe versus Wade. So we took that and posed that in front of the justices, and that's where they came up with the argument of a woman's right to privacy.
Mm.
And what you have is you have the left being able to triangulate again this message because they're much better at linguistics.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
now it becomes about women's rights and all over the place, and they won't have health care and they won't have this. No, it's one issue. And it should be changed to a woman's right to abort her child. Forget a woman's right to privacy because they're going to have their privacy. They're going to have what the
Right.
privacy. Meanwhile, the privacy is being taken. Look what they did to. They're taking in China, for instance. They're taking the social engineering or social justice based on social credits, whether or not you can get credits and do commerce.
Yeah, you can buy stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Imagine
it's
when
crazy.
that and Biden wants to now do away with our cash. Is that I don't know if I'm hearing that. Is that true? Did he sign some paper on that?
I don't know if he signed anything, but I know that the left have been wanting to go to digital currency forever. I mean, that's kind of their thing because it's just another way to control us and also control and track what we do, what we buy, what we purchase. It's for a party that wants privacy or says they want privacy. That's going to destroy privacy.
Absolutely.
When I originally heard John James was going to be in this, I got really excited because I'm a big Dynasty fan. It was one of those things where I was kind of like, okay, John James is going to be Joe Biden. How's that going to work? And when I watched it, and the makeup, which is very subtle, I didn't see John James. I wasn't caught up in that's John James. I was watching a great character actor portray Joe Biden, and I thought it was very believable. I thought it was there were elements that were funny and also kind of horrifying, and at the same time, I felt empathy in some ways to this man who obviously loves his son. I think it's undeniable that Joe Biden loves Hunter and probably loves him maybe more than ever because of the loss of Bo, because he's lost a child, so it's his only son. So, there's something there, I think, that is relatable in a lot of ways. And I just thought that you humanized him. As much as I hate this guy, right? I'm watching TV and I'm watching these speeches, and I can't stand him. I can't stand what he's doing to the country. I thought it was really interesting, and I thought kind of remarkable that you were able to make them relatable. And
Well, you have to
I could, I
because
could, I could feel for him, Robert. That dynamic was very real, very palpable, and I thought that added an element of empathy and sympathy to where you could invest emotionally, and you've got to know that most of your audience hate these two guys, but remarkably enough, your film makes them relatable.
well, I didn't want to because if you do that, if you off-put it and just create caricatures that are distasteful, there's no engaging the audience in terms of believability. I'm
Plus, aren't
considered
you just preaching to the converted
Yeah,
that way?
but I
I
mean,
mean,
the process of you talked about the process with the lighting and everything else, of
mhm,
course. That's primary to me because it separates the picture from being, just run of
it's
the mill something to something special. And the performance, I'm known as being one of the best Bond villains of all time. I
yeah,
played many different characters, so I understand how to humanize a character that has I and the first thing I tell the actors, don't comment on your character no matter how you personally may feel about them. You don't comment on that character. You have to justify that character's behavior
mhm,
and find out those things that, like there was even the instance when uh, Hunter has an affair with his Bo's
wife,
widow.
yeah, widow, right?
Now, in Hunter's autobiography, which I, of course, studied prior to doing this, as I did everything else, he has a little mention where he said it came out of grief. Now, that's a true human emotion.
Mhm,
You have to say grief does bring people together, can
yeah,
bring people together for that. So you could easily throw the sauce on that and make him just despicable and, but that's not an honest human emotion. So talking to John and to Lawrence and to the girl that plays Emma, who
mhm,
plays Grace Anderson, and all the characters. You have to humanize these characters, and then their actions. You can judge their actions
mhm,
because I thought to myself, Joe Biden is a guy that's been in politics 45 years, who's been winning elections.
yeah,
So what's he coming across to the people? How is he able to, whatever it might be, get those votes? So you got to show that in the character.
yeah. This film has elements of satire? Why did you choose to do satire?
Well, because to me, again, it's an interesting art form, to a film that has that satirical aspect to it, a dark comedy, a black
Right.
comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So the dark comedy aspect engages people. Again, like you're saying, you're watching, so it keeps you engaged, and the humor, and working toward that humor, um, picking out those beats,
Right.
those what I call Abbott and Costello beats. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? That are between Hunter and Joe, that are very funny but very grounded in not just a Saturday Night Live skit, but coming out of that whole thing. You know what I mean? Even the look on the face when he says, "Corn Pop, Dad, we were talking about suffering."
That's the scene where you can see where Hunter's just kind of like, even he's just kind of like,
Yeah. Where did that come
like,
from? Where did that
Dad,
go?
where are you? He's trying to have a connection. He's trying to
Yeah.
have, and they do have a connection. He does care about him,
Yeah.
but
Well, even the line he goes, "Son, you're the smartest man I know."
right.
I mean, but and the thing of it is, and Hunter says, "I just want to make him proud. I just want to make him proud." Now, we know how he loved Bo and how he thought about Bo and how Bo was a larger than life figure
Yeah.
who would probably be president someday. That was the hope. And now Hunter is, what son is Hunter? Where does he fit in? And, look, the guy has, again, every family has been plagued by addiction. I had an ex,
Mhm.
I had children that had problems, and I'm sensitive to all of that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and I pose the question, and it comes up in the film, could perhaps this whole thing been a cry for bigger help from the father, to the father?
Yeah.
Why do you leave? Like, even when I was casting, there was an actress in Los Angeles who, a friend of theirs or hers, had an Airbnb that Hunter stayed at, and there was a backpack with another laptop and drugs left in that Airbnb. So what is this? What is the underlying message that's going on here?
He wants to get caught,
You could assume that. You can
but that's
suggest it.
a cry for help.
Yeah, that's a cry for help.
Yeah.
And it's like, let me bring it down because it's not right. Because if you know you're compromised, imagine if you know you're compromised. How do you live with the hypocrisy of compromise? You have to
Conscience has
drug
got to be.
yourself.
Yeah. Wow.
You have to drug yourself, right? That's what some of it comes from, a hole that's within, and then the absolute compromise of living a bit of a lie.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of, I just can't take it, and he even says to his daughter, or his own daughter, he says, "I'm not going to be like, meaning his father, then take a part of your money for the rest of your life."
Mm-hmm.
That's a deep down thing, deep
Yeah.
down. And so there's little things, even though his autobiography is not as confessional as it could be, perhaps. It's confessional in terms of getting the drug stuff out of the way. And you know what's
Mm-hmm.
absurd to me? Joe Biden was on 60 Minutes or whatever recently, and they talked to him about the drugs. And it's so absurd. Isn't it absurd to you that they question him about, well, does your son have? Yes, I love he's a good boy, man. He goes, and I love my son. And so I said, did he listen to one of my interviews in terms of humanizing the drug addiction? So now all of a sudden, this has become the talking point of the left. Let's bring up the drug addiction and the poor guy, but not the corruption. How about the follow-up question to that saying, but yes, Mr. President, did your son, when you were on the plane in China, and he went to China with you, and he made deals with the communist Chinese spy chief and the energy companies of different companies in China, nuclear companies and whatnot, did he discuss it with you at all? Did you get on the plane? I mean, how long is a plane ride from China back to America? And did you not, talk about any kind of business meeting he had? Who did you meet with, son?
Yeah, man. Plausible deniability only goes so far, and I've seen too much evidence at this point. It just doesn't square. The guy, it's like I was saying, the guy was on his own without Secret Service. Anything could have happened to him to be put in a position where he's been compromised, or as Peter likes to talk about in Red Handed, the elite capture that the Chinese are very open about targeting powerful people for. And why not? Why wouldn't you want to have somebody like that under your thumb or controlled? It's in the best interests of the CCP and the Chinese. So it's scary, man. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing to me is these are world leaders. These are important people, and it's scary to me from the standpoint that the media doesn't even realize what's at stake here and what's at risk. So
Well,
they're too busy, carrying water for
No,
them.
they have to realize it because they ignore the border, they ignore immigration. They want to pretend that sending a few people to different parts of the country from Texas that's been flooded, that it's wrong for them to send anybody to a sanctuary city across the state, across the nation. And that's the biggest issue, like what DeSantis did with Martha's Vineyard and with Abbott did to New York or whatever, that this is the biggest issue and it's the most important. I mean, what they did to these poor immigrants and everything else. Meanwhile, the American people are suffering. The fentanyl that's pouring into our nation from where?
China.
Fentanyl that's enough to kill
And
every single one of us.
They're working in tandem with the Sinaloa cartel and the drug cartels.
All of those cartels, and you got people from all over coming in that we don't know who they are, and there's such an outpouring of them. And I say to bring them to Pelosi's house, bring them to Schumer's house,
Absolutely,
bring them to everyone that's not. Bring them to Mitch McConnell's house, bring them to everyone that has. Because I met with Mitch McConnell in 2009 or 2010. I wrote an article on Breitbart about getting a handle on immigration back then. I had a plan. And I told him, and I said, why aren't the GOP, why aren't Republicans bringing up, why are they letting the left define immigration policy? And now here we are 11 years later, and we're still in the same thing. So that tells me our government doesn't want to do a damn thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to do anything with this issue, that they don't have the courage to do the issue. It's the same thing with the environment, like we had a big hurricane in Florida. Okay. And then Joe Biden puts in the aside about, the climate thing. And whether it's man-made or not, that's not the question.
Yeah.
The environment changes. Climate changes. And if we're going to go through a period where we're in jeopardy in some aspects because of this change that's going on, and if you're an intelligent human being, you have to know. I did a film in the Amazon rainforest in 1990 about the gold digging and what it was doing, the excavating of gold and the minerals with the mercury and the poisoning of the rivers and the destruction. Well, that's lithium batteries are worse. And no one's talking about it. No one brings up how do we go from here to there without a longer transitional period, and what's going to happen with those batteries when they are no good? Where's the pollution going to come from? Who's mining this stuff, and the cost of it? And again, I saw I forget who it was recently. It was Bill Gates of all people. I don't know if you saw the thing about Bill Gates. I tweeted it out. He's talking to a group of people. He goes, what are you guys talking about with this clean energy thing? What are you thinking? And where are we going to get our steel and our concrete and our this and our that? He goes, do you have a machine in your desks in Wall Street that create steel and plastics out of nothing?
Right.
What are you talking about? How are you? And that was Gates talking about this. I don't know when it was. But yet they push this idea. And the youth, Gen Z is the most ignorant group of people.
They're
Either that or they just want a communist nation. And they've been bred to be ignorant. For instance, I'm Italian American, okay? Columbus Day just happened. Now, I'm all for Indigenous Peoples Day, but not on Columbus Day.
Indigenous Peoples Day, what, like the Aztecs who would kill 250,000 of their own people every year? Those kind of
whatever,
Indigenous Day?
whatever it is, if they want to have an Indigenous People Day, let them have it. But yet the youth,
Yeah.
and so many people, and I see it on Twitter and Instagram, they want to pretend. I did a movie with Brando in 1992 called Christopher Columbus: The Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
We filmed in Malta, Spain, and the Virgin Islands. I was in Madrid. I was in Barcelona. I met with the Spanish experts.
Mm-hmm.
I read logs of Columbus's. I played Martin Pinzon, who's as big as Columbus is in Spain. I read the logs.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there were a lot of Davis on all three voyages with Columbus.
Really?
DAVI with the apostrophe over the I. They told me that. And then when I went to Sicily, they gave me my family crest from 1493. And it was very interesting. But irrespective of that, Brett, the lies being told about Columbus, the misrepresentation, and there's no accountability. Columbus did not have a slave.
No.
Columbus was out of the New World before that happened. And then I want to pose this question to Gen X. Transgender operations and this and that and this and this and whatever your bag is, let it be. I support LGBTQ. Anybody's lifestyle, I don't get into that. All right? That's your personal choice.
It's who you go to bed with. We don't care about that.
Right. But to say that the West is all corrupt and colonization, and you wouldn't have these operations if it wasn't for the West. And any child back in the day, like you said, the Aztecs and the rest of them.
Mayans, Incas, yeah.
I don't know if this is true, but if a child seemed weak, what happened to that child? A baby.
They're usually tossed aside like the Spartans would do. They were not kept alive.
Okay. So think about that. Think about that generational thing that Gen Z is talking about in terms of, saying Columbus is such the monster.
It's the same with the Native Americans. My parents lived down in Cochise County, which is famous for the Chiricahua Apaches, which warred against the U.S. Army for years. Geronimo and whatnot. These tribes warred with other tribes. They enslaved other tribes. The Indians, the Native Americans, were not some peaceful people that just went around living in teepees. They slashed and burned. They used up resources and moved into other places, and then they would knock heads with other tribes over resources. It's called the human condition. It's just the way people are and tribes operate. And it's like you said, colonialism, that's not something that's exclusively Western or American. I mean, you ever hear of Genghis Khan? Napoleon? I mean, this is just the way the world works. It's like Rush used to say, the history of the world is murder, death, destruction, slavery, war. It's pretty brutal. And we're really lucky to live in this little envelope where we've had, largely by the yield of the World War II generation, we've had this really nice little lull. It seems like this peaceful lull. So hopefully Biden doesn't drag us into nuclear war here in the coming weeks.
Frightening. But getting back to the environment for a second.
Yeah. This
so
environment.
I want this generation to be accountable. And here's my challenge to this generation and to future politicians that are out there. Mm-hmm. If the climate crisis is bigger than World War II, if it's the biggest existential threat to our nation and to the world, bigger than anything we've ever seen, if this is so, if Al Gore believes it, and many other people believe what they're saying, and Biden and Kamala Harris and AOC and a list of people, Prince Charles and everybody else, that's King Charles now, everybody else is UN, everybody. Why don't we have an Earth Force? Why is not every 18 to 21-year-old demanded to enlist, drafted into the Earth Force for 4 to 6 years? To learn reforestation, flood mishaps, the rebuilding of inner cities, the relocation, new green technologies. They can learn new green technologies. Mm-hmm. Why don't we have this Earth Force? You've got 20 suicides a day by military personnel coming in. Mm-hmm. You've got the fentanyl, you've got the gangs, you've got everything else. And you've got this entitled generation that wants the environment clean. Greta. Let's go, Greta. And I'm all for it. But what about the Earth Force, Greta? Let's have an Earth Force, Greta. Talk about that. Put your money where your mouth is, kids, Instead of just, if you care about this environment, you should demand that the governments have the Earth Force that you can enlist in 4 to 6 years. And then you can learn new green technologies. You can come up with a thing. How about that? It's not killing anybody.
Yeah.
Who wants to enlist? If you don't enlist for the armed forces, you draft into the Earth Force.
I like the idea much better than the Peace Corps. That's for sure. I think it's a much cooler idea, especially if you're talking about, that sounds like something that potentially Teddy Roosevelt might have gotten behind, something, where you're
the conservation corps,
conservation, reforestation. We want to take care of our great forests. There's something else.
It's all part of that. It would deal with forest fires. It would deal with reforestation. It would deal with the floods. It would deal now. Imagine if there was an Earth Force, and this thing happened now in Fort Myers and the rest of bingo, you swoop in there, and now you have a group of people there that have been trained now to help a community. If this is going to be bigger than World War II.
Right.
Now, conservatives will say one thing, but
it's just another government institution you're creating, Robert.
Yeah, but you know what? It puts accountability. Now the kids can have health care and education.
Well, we also
4 to
drive
6 years.
But we also drive the narrative. We don't let them control the narrative on the environment.
And then now you say, wait a second, okay, show me your commitment to the environment.
Right.
Show me now. Here's your culpability for it.
Yeah.
Now, if that happened, would they all be dancing in the streets for the environment? Will they all be lying on the street for cars to run over them because they want to stop traffic and carbon emissions and the whole 9 yards of it? Or would they think twice about it? The government, as Reagan said, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, and I'm paraphrasing, they don't want to solve the problems.
Yeah.
They don't want to solve the problems. But there has to be a way of, because I have 8 kids. I remember in school, Environmental Day and everything Environmental Day for 20 years, 25 years. Kids have been indoctrinated into, in a good way, caring about the environment.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we have more drug addiction. We've got all this stuff that's happening in our cities and a youth that is confusing to me. I guess that's why the older generation just dies out. And this brave new world happens with these kids because you try to bridge the gap. Kids don't know. You can bring up a great book that I remember we had to learn the classics. We had to learn 2 years of Latin. Mm-hmm. Kids nowadays, it's too hard. Okay, we'll lower the standards.
Right.
Oh, don't read that. Let's read this book about critical race theory. This is what you should learn about.
Yeah.
Don't learn about the past. Don't learn about history. Don't learn Edgar Allan Poe or Charles Dickens or Shakespeare. Who's that? Kids don't know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I again, it's like, having you on here is important to me because you and I deal in storytelling and entertainment. You deal with movies and 24 frames per second, where I'm dealing with page by page, frame by frame in comics and graphic novels. And I just think that there's a great opportunity for the right, or even just center right people, centrist people, to say, how do we get the classics back out to the kids? How do we make them read Last of the Mohicans, Moby Dick, get interested in music and the arts of in the days of yore? And I think that movies and comic books, any way where you're merging history and visuals, I think that's the only way you're going to get them hooked, because people don't read books anymore, man. They don't crack a book, but they will go watch a movie. They'll read a graphic novel if they can be entertained while being informed and learning about history or learning about some subject. It's like taking a book. The book could be a kale salad. Nobody wants to eat that. But your movie or my graphic novel could be a power bar, something that tastes like a candy bar. It's delicious and it's good for you. It's got 13 grams of protein and all kinds of good carbs. And then again, it's like, I retain movies and movie scenes like most people, and also scenes from comic books and graphic novels more probably than I do information maybe that I read in a book, because I've got the visual attached to it. And in the case of storytelling, you've got the emotional underpinning. and the visuals and the sound and everything combined into one perfect medium. So I
You
just
know,
think to myself, we need to get back to storytelling, man. The right needs to spend money and invest in the arts, which is the
absolutely. I've
last
been
place they've been
culture,
putting money.
culture,
Yes, yeah.
culture. And another thing, years ago, I did a couple of voices for Halo, the
Mhm.
Halo thing,
You
and
did Batman too. We're gonna talk about your TV. You
other
did Batman
games,
Beyond. Yeah.
other little games I did, write
Yeah.
voices for them,
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto, Scarface. Anyway,
Unreal.
so I'm thinking, and as I'm watching my kids play these games 20 years ago, and getting to the level 2 and level 3 and level
Right.
4, and they're happy about what they're doing. I go, what a waste. I go, what if these video games, tied to these video games, were lessons in history, lessons in English, in math, and they can play these games, but they're learning a skill. And I talked to a big company, about doing educational games.
Mhm.
I don't know if they have them now, but this was 20 years ago. Imagine having Shakespeare as a video game. And as the kids are going through chapter 1 or chapter 2 of the Shakespeare, and you have great actors, voice actors, play
Mhm.
these characters, you can truncate it like you're doing,
Yeah.
in the Gothic novels there that you
Right.
have and stuff
Right.
like that. You can truncate that, but at the same time, the education. So to get to the next level, they've got to get all this information.
With regard to Florida,
Go
you've
ahead.
been down there for a while. You're a native. How's Governor DeSantis performed in wake of the hurricane?
He
And
was
how's
terrific, terrific. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, he got that under control. I mean, under control as much as you could in the short amount of time. But the resources and the concern for the people, he's a leader. The
Mhm.
guy's an absolute. He cares. He's a leader, and I think the one interesting part about all of our governments, and at times, I think, in a certain way, when there are these disasters, the nation comes together
Mhm.
in a certain way. There's no left and right. There's just human beings.
Right.
Uh, and he hasn't let any political ideologies get in the way
Mhm.
of the job of healing an area that's been devastated by a natural disaster.
I was blown away when I saw all utility, crews, the trucks all lined up, ready
Yeah.
to
I
go,
mean,
and
he was
I've never
very
seen
quick.
that before.
He was on this right away, talking about it a week before it happened, 2 weeks before it happened. So
Mhm.
mostly what happens is, I think a lot of the people that, an incident could be a potential, but it could go away. I'm sure he was on the phone galvanizing the forces,
Mhm.
saying, okay, what do we have to do? Let's get this ready, let's get that ready. So
Yeah.
this way we hit the ground running. And that's what he did. The preparation of
He's a
hitting.
Navy man. Wouldn't surprise me if some of that military background helped him.
Absolutely. No.
Yeah.
There's no, it's just like, absolutely. When you have those skills, you have those skills. When
Mhm.
you're wired like that, you have those skills to commandeer
Mhm.
an issue and a problem as
Yeah.
massive as this is.
You've worked with some of the very best directors over the years, and I'm just going to name a few here because I can't name them all. We go on forever. And I encourage everyone to go check out your IMDb page because it's really amazing. I saw some stuff there yesterday that I didn't even know about. But you've worked with Richard Donner, Steven Spielberg, John McTiernan, John Glenn, Blake Edwards, and Paul Verhoeven, Sly Stallone, many others. What kind of things did you learn from those guys when you worked with them in front of the camera, which you now apply as a director to the people you work with behind the camera, essentially nowadays?
Well, you learn from every experience,
Mhm.
I mean, I've worked with hundreds of directors, good, bad, great, and indifferent.
Mhm.
And you learn from everyone, and even those that you haven't worked with when you're watching a film. I never watched the movie. Even as a youth, I was a student of film,
Mhm.
foreign film, from Fellini to De Sica to Rossellini to Mario Monicelli to the great French Bresson and, even the Spanish, I mean, world cinema.
Mhm.
And so culling out, watching a film, not just performance, uh, or the great American directors like Kazan and Ford and everything else, and Billy Wilder, I mean, you eat this up when
Mhm.
you really are into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was culling out and watching it, and then the great DPs and seeing So you want to learn, and you want to Giuseppe Tornatore. You know, I mean, there's
Jan de Bont.
Jan de Bont as a DP.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Jos Vacano. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so many. Vittorio Storaro. I mean, Alan Davio, Nick McLean. I mean, many people.
Mhm.
So you're watching and you're learning and you're assimilating, and then from great films. So if you're watching great film, not just necessarily being inside them, but if you're watching a movie and you're breaking down that film,
Mhm.
that's the language you start to learn.
Right.
That's the language you start to learn, and that's the
Mhm.
sensibility you start to see. So now you see the lens, you see through the lens a different way. You see, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what's a good film, or you know what appeals to you, and you know what's something that is a bit drecky. You know, I love Scorsese as well.
Right.
You know, I love The Force of Evil by John Garfield,
Mhm.
that John Garfield did. Abe Polanski directed it. So you watch all these great films, and you kind of like cull out your language, because it's a language.
It is.
Film is a language, and with light and movement and camera and staging,
Yeah.
and also being stage trained. I mean, I was trained. I did over a few thousand performances on the stage before as an actor, before I stepped in front of a camera.
Well, and you got into film first before TV, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Right. Right. Because you were in a movie with
Sinatra.
Sinatra. Yeah.
Contract on Cherry Street, and then they brought me out, and then you start doing the guest stars, and then you learn
Well,
from that too, because a lot of those guest star directors
yeah.
become major directors.
Well, so I mean, so you're doing film, and then I was just looking at your IMDb yesterday, and I went down to TV, and I've just got to read some of these. This blows my mind. These are some of the things you starred in during probably the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Charlie's Angels, Incredible Hulk, Dynasty, Saint Elsewhere, T.J. Hooker, Hill Street Blues, The Fall Guy, Heart to Heart, The A-Team, Hunter, L.A. Law, The Equalizer, and Wise Guy, which love Wise Guy. I feel bad what happened to Ken.
Yeah, great guy, by the way.
Oh, I mean, that guy, let me tell you something. If that guy was around today, I mean, he'd probably be the most sought after actor by Marvel and DC. I mean, that guy could have done anything he wanted.
Yeah.
But that's a hell of a list, Robert. And it's just sort of like, what are you missing here? Magnum and Rockford? It just blows my mind, man. But
yeah.
I mean, it's all that is, brought you to where you are today. And that's kind of the journey of the artist. And I'm sure all the stuff you learned on those TV shows as well goes into.
Oh yeah, because there
what
were
you
some
do
great
as well.
directors. Those were
Yeah.
all terrific directors. And,
What do you think made TV special about those eras, as opposed to today? Do you think the I know they would have an army of writers on these shows, so I mean, you could move fast, but it just seems like, and I don't know, maybe if those guys were more classically trained back in the day, it just seems like it's better TV, it's better writing, it's more crisp. The economy, they seem to do more with less, whereas today these series just get longer and longer, and it just seems like they can't even perform a third act to save their life.
Yeah. I mean, you do have some good shows, absolutely. Some
Absolutely,
very
you do.
A shows. But back then, you had the studio system. You had again, when you get closer to the source, the closer you are to the source,
Yeah.
sometimes the more vibrant it is. And as the light travels, it gets diffused. And that's the same thing with acting technique. I trained with Stella Adler, with Lee Strasberg,
Right.
Sandy Meisner. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
George Standoff, who did with Michael Jackson. So those guys were the source.
Right.
They were right there with the creation of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the writing aspect of it. And kids today, again, when they're trained, and there's great writers and there's great stuff. I'm not saying nothing about, there's wonderful technicians and writers and everything else.
Sure.
But there was a different education. There was different education, and the classics prepare you for a sensibility, as opposed to just having an agenda, a woke agenda that's being pushed.
Mm-hmm. I see it in the arts as well, just from the standpoint of visuals, artists, and illustrators. I see a lack of fundamentals. I see a lot of people that learn programs and learn software, which allows them to do things. But I don't see somebody who's studied color theory or composition. So that's positive, negative space.
Let's look at Picasso. Let's look at Picasso could do an absolutely representational Rembrandtian kind of paint.
He could. He could paint photorealistically. A lot of people don't know that, but if you study his early work, his blue period and stuff, you see that.
He was there.
And he transcended past that, basically.
Well, that's what you see. So what the kids today do is they take Picasso at the end, Cubism, and start with that. So they can never go back to become representational. He distorted reality.
Right.
He took reality and then he became this impressionist, surrealist, and then distorting reality.
He had to master that photorealism,
the technique,
and to push into abstract.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's that. Instead, what kids go to today is result of this thing, and they have no clue in terms of
the fundamentals, where it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I see it too, man. I see it too. That's why I always encourage people, get back, just go back to the fundamentals. If you work the fundamentals, everything will work out just fine. Yeah. Even if you're having an off day and you're a pro and you can't get into that groove, keep working the fundamentals. And at the end of the day, even if it takes you twice as long, you'll end up where you want it to be. So, all right, let's move on to Bond, and then we'll bow out. You're widely considered one of the very best Bond villains in the history of the franchise as Franz Sanchez in License to Kill. And the word is the Broccoli's are going to cast the next Bond villain before casting the next Bond. What elements are crucial for a Bond villain, and what advice would you give an actor who whoever's going to have the high honor of stepping into this next role as a Bond villain? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, maybe they have a plan, and that's why, their promotional aspect, so they get two bites of the apple here. The villain, now everybody's waiting for because they're very brilliant at the promotional aspect, Bond star.
Yes, they are.
I learned that from them. They had a tremendous publicity machine led by Saul Cooper and Jerry Giroux, great guys, and Cubby Broccoli, of course, and Dana Broccoli. And when I did of course, Ian Fleming is the source. And in Casino Royale, and this is where Timothy and I went back to, and I discussed this with Michael Wilson and everybody, John Glenn, great director, that in Casino Royale, Ian Fleming describes the Bond and the villain as mirror images of each other.
Right.
So I think I was the youngest Bond villain at that time. And I was also the most formidable in terms of the physique, because it's a heavyweight title fight. So you can't have, even though there's some great villains, you want to at least have the stature of, and even, and again, it's the part they create. So I can't say for Sanchez, it was this mirror image of Sanchez was, you play the villain like Bond, and you play Bond like the villain.
Right.
And then you'll be able to get that sense of danger that Bond needs, and that sense of charm that the villain needs, because his acts are already hideous.
Right.
So now you have to then, how do I make him charming? How do I make him believable? How do I make him somebody that I can justify his actions with, There was no act, very interestingly, in that film, when you analyze it, that Sanchez didn't commit that wasn't done to him first. Even from the opening beat with Lupe.
Right.
You have his girlfriend, Sanchez's girlfriend, and you got some guy wants to screw with my girlfriend. You think there's not going to be any ramifications with that? You stepped on my territory.
Right.
You've come into me. Now the DEA comes, because Sanchez now is vulnerable because of Lupe. Now the DEA, now they stepped on me. Everybody would have been fine. Leave me alone. You know what I mean? Now then, the loyalty is more important to me than money. And we discussed that. I discussed that with the writers. And that was the Achilles heel, because now Bond can start to implement like he did with Crest. So it just is it depends on the character.
Right.
It depends on the character. And don't, it's a and every character there could be a different approach.
And one of the things that I loved about your character in License to Kill is you nearly get Bond at the end. If you didn't have that lighter, lights out, Tim's
Yeah.
done. I
Yeah.
mean, you guys were, you're formidable because you can go toe to toe with him physically. You don't have to rely on henchmen. You don't have an odd job, even though you did have Benicio, who was fantastic, and he's so young looking. It's just kind of a trip.
Yeah.
To see Benicio del Toro in this, who's not front and center. He's just the henchman. So
Yeah.
Probably one of his first films, more than likely.
Yeah, he did Pee-wee's Main Adventure or something like that.
Was he in that? Was he in Pee-wee's?
Yeah, he played Catboy or something, and then Bond was his break.
Oh,
we spent 5 months together. Then we did Columbus together. I got him.
Wow.
I recommended him from Christopher Columbus, The Discovery,
Wow.
when we did that.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen that. I've seen Ridley's 1492,
Yeah.
which is a phenomenal film. Some people say it's boring. I like it. I love Vangelis's soundtrack, but I'm gonna have to check out.
Yeah, our film is like a travelogue in a way. I mean, look, Mario Puzo and John Briley wrote the screenplay.
Not bad.
But it was interesting story with that film because John Glenn directed it.
Really?
It was George Cosmatos, and then and Timothy was going to play Columbus, and then they left.
Wow.
And then Glenn was going to direct it, and then they had George Corofas, unknown actor, French actor, to play Columbus. Mm-hmm. Terrific guy. And I got the script, and this is by Puzo and Briley. I read the script, and you didn't have cell phones or anything, and computers weren't that great. You had to fax people. I talked to them, and I said, this is inaccurate. I go, Pinzone, based on the research I had done, they had gotten Pinzone all wrong. And I told them that. They said, well, when you come to Malta, we'll discuss it. And I sent them a bunch of notes and changes.
Uh-huh.
Thinking, I'm going to be blown off with this. What's going to happen? They're going to forget it. So I get finally to Malta. I get to the hotel, and John, the director, meets me. And he goes, Robert, did you speak to the Spanish experts? I go, what Spanish experts? He says, well, to get the seal from the Crown of Spain, and also to get the ships, the replicas, they had to the experts had to the script. I go, yeah. He goes, did you speak to them? I go, no, John, I didn't speak. He says, are you sure? I said, no. Why? Because every note you've given us, they've made the same suggestions and want these changes made. You didn't speak to them. John, I didn't even know they were experts. And he laughed. He goes, okay. So that he was telling me you're going to get those changes, basically. I said this at the Faith and Family Values, Ralph Reed's thing, years ago. Mm-hmm. I spoke. And I says, how many lawyers are here?
Yes.
Raise their hands. I go, how many are in the arts? Writers, directors, actors, singers, and musicians. Oh, mm-hmm. We need more of you.
Yeah.
We got enough lawyers.
Got plenty of lawyers, plenty of politicians, plenty of doctors. What we're lacking, and even at this stage, man, even with guys like you out there doing stuff, we're still lacking, parents encouraging their kids to get into the arts. And that's the only reason I ended up.
And the money guys,
Yes.
I mean, let's sell hats, but at the same time, let's sell tickets to the films that people are doing.
Yeah.
It's as important. It's important that it's crucial that they watch My Son Hunter.
Absolutely.
It's crucial that they watch My Son Hunter and then tell their friends about it. So get the DVD, go to mysonhunter.com.
That's a great update because we didn't talk about that last time because the film had just come out. You guys were just streaming. And I asked you, I said, are you guys going to do a hard copy? And here we are. So you have a hard copy, you got DVD. Where can you get that?
mysonhunter.com, and they can order that now. They can download the film, watch the film, own it, order a DVD, mysonhunter.com.
Yeah, buy a hard copy. Well, Robert, thank you so much. Sadly, we're out of time. Why don't you give everybody your social media coordinates so they know where to find you and your work?
Find me at Robert John Davi on Twitter, at Robert John Davi on Twitter, mm-hmm. at Robert Davi for Instagram and Truth Social, mm-hmm. at Robert Davi. And then Robert Davi on Facebook and Davi Sings Sinatra on Facebook.
Perfect.
And, I've got a website, Davi Sings Sinatra. When I tour, I put a lot of information up on that.
Yeah, I can't wait to start touring again. That's going to be fun.
Me too.